Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this week's Pastor's Podcast. I am Cory, here with Jason.
Hello.
And Joel.
Hello, hello.
And so we, first of all, want to wish you a Happy New Year. Very grateful that we have survived 2020 and are now into 2021. So looking forward to all the things the Lord has in store for us in the coming year. So the focus of this podcast is we want to take a few moments to reflect on all the questions that you guys answered as part of the members' feedback and kind of members' voice questions when we did our fall small groups in one of the kind of the first phase of implementing ministry teams. First of all, I just want to say thank you for everyone who has submitted questions. We had a ton of information. Heather was gracious enough to put all this in like an Excel document and just a lot of great information that we got from you guys. So again, thank you for taking the time to do that. And so what we wanted to do now was just briefly talk about some of the themes that came out of that. And we've broken it up into two categories. One was things that I think we just want to celebrate, things that we were encouraged by, things that we just want to take a moment to give thanks to the Lord for these things being present in our church. And then the second one, things that we got feedback from that are areas that we want to continue to grow in and push forward in as leaders in the church, as a church as a whole. So, Jason, I'm going to let you kind of moderate this and kind of go through some of the things we'll weigh in on and kind of reflect on. Some of them won't really require any comment necessarily. So I'm going to turn it over to you, brother.
Sure. So yeah, we'll start with the things, the feedback that we were encouraged by. So the first one that I have down here is that there was a huge desire on like behalf of our members to spend more time together and to know each other more deeply. And so what are some of the things that you guys saw in those comments? I'll start with one, give you time to think about it a little bit. A lot of people talked about wanting to see more whole church or church at large activities. So things like meals together, potlucks, like to use the old school picnics, right? Picnics.
Amen.
So things like that where there's a chance to get to know a larger group and more of the church as a whole. So that was really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. And I think part of that is, I think some of that was present before COVID, and I think COVID just intensifies that because I know for my family, and I think this is probably true for all of us, just like one of the things you lament is the ability to kind of freely gather with other families and people, and just you miss that. You realize how much before COVID, at least for us, we had maybe neglected that more than we should have. So anyway, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, people also mentioned the desire to hear prayer requests communicated. Yeah. I think historically, most of that kind of like receiving prayer and asking for prayer was happening in community groups. But a number of people in my group is included. A number of people were talking about the desire to see more of those prayer requests that go across the entirety of our membership, which was cool.
Yeah, it's really awesome to see. Yeah, and then kind of related to that is it's a desire to know more about our members' lives, particularly those kind of like big life updates, like people getting engaged or married or having children, those kinds of things. That just a way to be able to have that more visible. Yeah,
things that you could summarize like doing things that create more of a family feel for our congregation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that we are family together. So
yeah. So man, bottom line, it seems like you guys love each other, or at least the idea of each other if you don't know each other well and you want to know each other more.
Love the idea of loving each other.
That's a good start, right? So good stuff. The next one I have down here is there was a desire to love and engage our neighbors well. So tons of feedback. Obviously, a lot of our questions were aimed at that because a lot of what we want to emphasize with ministry teams is starting to do ministry outside of the walls of the church and out into our neighborhood. But there was tons of good feedback on that. So, guys, what did you see as far as that goes?
I think I was just encouraged by that in the various ways. Like you said, it came across in many different ways, but I think you could summarize it that there was a strong desire to be for the common good of our neighborhoods and to see our neighborhoods, our cities flourish as a result of the Christian faith. So very thankful for that. I mean, that's something that I wasn't really surprised by. I mean, like our members have shown in past years and past opportunities, their love for these things, their desire to be engaged in these things. So just seeing it repeated in so many different ways throughout various answers was encouraging.
Yeah, and it spanned kind of from kind of traditional like justice and mercy type of ministries all the way to like how can we engage in the public square, just in kind of even from an intellectual standpoint. That was something that was mentioned when we were talking about kind of a collective corporate giftings that the church has. There are a lot of smart people at City Church. How can we engage our city, not just defending the faith, but representing the faith in the public square? I think is a really cool opportunity. Also, it was mentioned multiple times, just how we can use our building to serve more people. So it's just such a gift that we have this building. We bought it in 2014 in the most ridiculous of manners, and it's still kind of insane to me that we have this thing. But there are a number of things that we haven't yet done that we could potentially do to serve our neighbors well with it.
Yeah. And just want to thank you guys again. This has actually stirred some great conversations. We've enjoyed talking about these things. Obviously, when you look at Cleveland and Cleveland Heights and this whole area, there are a lot of things to address when you start thinking about justice and mercy. And it can be even overwhelming. In some ways, I feel for the team Matt's going to be losing, because you're going to have to zero in on some things, right? There's so much brokenness, so much need around us. And then so many issues to address. Like it's going to require patience, but also I think one of the things that the flip side of this, of being excited about it, is also when we get into the nitty gritty of actually starting to address these things, it's going to take a lot of work and patience and diligence and commitment from our members. And again, that whole idea of pushing the ministry down to the members of the church doing the work of the church, it's going to require buy-in from all of us to start to address these things. But it's good to see that kind of initial observation of the brokenness and things that need to be addressed and the excitement about it, but also just being cautiously optimistic about what it's going to take to address those things. But fun things to talk about and super exciting. So thank you guys for that feedback. Okay, the next thing that we noticed was there's a large desire for spiritual growth, discipleship, whatever you want to talk about. So one of the things, then I'll kind of pitch it to you guys, is just what does discipleship mean? So while we were encouraged by it, I think the way people would define what it means to be to become a disciple or to grow in Christian maturity, there's lots of different ways that can be done. So people mention things from theology classes and Bible studies to kind of like the one-on-one mentorship. And so I think on our end, that's something that we're just going to have to clearly define. What does that look like at City Church? But the overarching thing that we saw is that there's a huge desire for people to grow in their faith, and they desire their church to be a part of obviously helping them to do that. So what did you guys observe in these comments?
Yeah, one of the desires from the birth of City Church was to have a congregation that was theologically inquisitive and theologically developed and mature. And so just to see those things be an interest with our church in so many ways was good. With COVID, we haven't been able to do the theology classes like we were, which is unfortunate because I really think we, for a couple of years there, had a really neat thing going that I think resonated with a lot of people. It was particularly the smaller classes that were able to address particular issues and utilize various members and their giftings and their expertise in teaching those classes was something that was exciting at the time, and I think clear that for the members that were here during that time was something that they appreciate, and whatever things look like post-COVID, of needing to have some way of continuing that type of opportunities for our members to teach on things and to learn on things that we're facing day to day. So,
yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is just that it is encouraging to see this as kind of a staple in who we are and our identity, and that's, I think, largely due to you, Cory, and I know that it's one of your passions to see more formalized theological education happening in the context of the local church. And we've certainly like benefited from that passion that you've had, and seen some really beautiful things in that. I think also some things that maybe we haven't seen as much of is kind of equipping people to be able to help me come up with a better way of saying exegeting your culture. How do you just like being able to understand what you're seeing around you through the lens of the scriptures, with the help and aid of the Spirit of God. How do we engage in the current issues that we're living in? I think that's something that we can grow in as a staff and as leaders, is offering more opportunities to engage in those topics. We did a intense kind of study of lots of different books over the summer that was all about a current issue, which is great, but just kind of digging in more, how can we further equip our members to practically live out their faith?
Yeah, 2020 really had a way of bringing so many of those things like up to the surface, right? And it was super encouraging to hear our people's desire to want to learn about that. And it also told me that our people are trying to have these conversations, and they want to have these conversations to address how a Christian would think well about so many of these things, and how we believe the scriptures have an answer for so many of these things that the world doesn't offer. And so I too was super encouraged by the desire of our people to want more of that. So it's great. Anything else on the spiritual growth side? All right. So the next thing I have down here is there is a cautious optimism, but an excitement nonetheless for ministry teams. So I guess, when we're kind of laying this out, this is such a new and different way of doing things. There's really not a ton of models, I would say, in the church. In a lot of ways, this is something that we were, convicted by, convinced that we need to do. But this is definitely an innovation thing that we're doing. And so I guess on our end, there's probably a lack of clarity that we're presenting to you. So that's something that we could admit to. But also, we are excited, and we're excited that you are starting to see it. And I think these small groups probably helped you start to see the vision, at least the foundation that we're working from. And, we'll be spending the next few weeks kind of laying out what this is going to look like. But nonetheless, you guys seem to be cautiously excited about what ministry teams could be. And so, that was refreshing and encouraging, because we had no idea how people would respond to this. So, guys, what did you see in some of the feedback there?
Yeah, I was encouraged that it was more excitement than not excitement. So, and I think cautious excitement is understandable. I think we're cautiously excited, because again, you don't know the fullness of something until you actually do it. And so, as we have spent, as a staff, an untold number of hours trying to think through all the logistics of this and plan for it, I think there is an excitement with us and with Heather and Matt, and so I was encouraged that excitement is bleeding over into the congregation. And I really am excited for, 2 or 3 months from now, where these things are being rolled out and what it can mean for the ministry of this church. Because and we've said this before, and just keep saying it, I think one of the things that is driving all of this for us is that we do not believe we are the church we need to be to effectively reach the Heights and surrounding area. And there's a lot of good things that are happening, but in some ways we're just not the church. We're not structured in a way that can effectively reach our neighborhoods. And so this isn't the silver bullet, but it is one step, I think, in the right direction to making City Church more better and faithfully equipped to do what needs to be done to be a distinct and visible expression of the local church in the Heights area and and surrounding neighborhoods and communities. So that part, I'm glad. I feel like that was being conveyed in some of the responses, that people were getting that and understanding that, and that was kind of the root of the excitement. So I was very encouraged by that. Yeah.
And I think now that we're starting to understand, I think a thing that a lot of people heard, and maybe rightfully so, is that ministry teams that's just a place where we're going to do a bunch of work. So we're going to tell you guys, we need to do this ministry and just push it to you. But such a large part of this and it's starting to address the things that we've talked about, spiritual growth, equipping, discipleship, is that a large component of these ministry teams is going to be equipping you to do the work of the ministry. So we see the needs. We're in this neighborhood in this particular time and place, and there's so much around us that we want to do, and the ministry teams is just the vehicle by which we're going to try to do what you said, Cory, about being a visible presence, a visible church in this neighborhood. That so much of what we've done before was kind of a bring people in, preach the word, and that's been such a huge thing for us, right? There is a presence here. There's a gospel presence. There's a place that people can hear about who Jesus is and what he has done for the world. But now we need to start to push that out into and go and reach our city, people that will never come through these doors unless we go out with the message in both the way that we love and treat people and with the actual words of the gospel. So yeah, super exciting. Joel, anything you would add to that part? Okay, great. So the last thing I have here is that I think one of the things that, and Cory brought this up, that was so encouraging to us, is that Cory and everyone that was instrumental in getting this church off the ground and started from the beginning. They wanted us to understand the corporate nature of Christianity and how it's not a me thing, it's a we thing, right? And so what did you guys see in some of the comments that you were encouraged by? It seems like people really get that and understand that well.
Yeah, it was an example of you try to incorporate this in so many little ways, and that it was encouraging to say, oh, well, it's working. like people are seeing, they see this, particularly in the liturgy. So like credit to Joel in like all the different ways that he, in small ways, it's kind of like a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit there. And the sum of that is like a creation of a DNA and part of a fabric of your church that people are getting that Christianity is not an I religion. It is a we religion. It is a corporate religion and cannot be understood independently from the corporate nature. So that, and particularly, I was encouraged and, to be honest, surprised in a good way how many people, I think this was on the first week where the question was most relevant to this, referenced communion as a way of communicating that.
So good.
That was a very pleasant surprise because sometimes we don't say that like so directly. We say it indirectly. And just was encouraged by that so many of our members recognize the appropriate place and theological significance of what communion is communicating each week. So I was encouraged by that.
Yeah. Again, how amped up that was because of the long stretch of time we weren't able to do that together in 2020. It was fresh on people's minds, I think.
You did your dissertation on communion, so it makes sense you're stoked about that. I was stoked about how many people put congregational singing.
Yeah, good.
As well. We
all have our pet things. So
that's encouraging to see people understanding it that way. I think also just to say it, like it's so a part of the fabric of who we are, and we've been like flexing that muscle, so to speak, that I think what we're seeing also just even in people's desire to grow more is that we can not necessarily move the pendulum. I think in our culture it's probably always necessary to emphasize the corporate nature of following Jesus, but that we can continue to grow in just our own individual grasping and applying of the gospel to our own lives, and saying we've definitely emphasized one over the other to a degree, I think.
And that's been intentional.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And I think that I think we're also seeing now over these years how we can emphasize in a healthy way the balance between understanding your personal faith in the context of the corporate community. So
well said. Yeah, good. All right, so we'll move on to the things that we need to address or continue to improve upon, because so many things we got comments. It was kind of a mixed bag. It's like, we're doing this well, we're moving toward this, but we're not quite there yet. And that's obvious, but so just a few categories to think through here. So the first one I want to bring up is communication. So this is one we are, I think, pretty well aware of, but we are made more aware of it every time we communicate something, particularly when we look back to the September members meetings and kind of this new idea of ministry teams, just how initially I wouldn't say we failed at communicating, but we definitely could have done better and been more clear with all of that. So it's something that we're constantly thinking about. I think, I've been a part of other churches and talked to a lot of other churches. This is something that's always a challenge to be able to communicate with our people in a very noisy world. And so, guys, what did you see, and what are you lamenting, or what are you wanting to see us do better?
No surprise, I guess.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Yeah.
No surprise.
Yeah.
I think if any of y'all know me personally, you know how awful I am at communicating in basically every medium. I think it's something that this is one of the things we talk about regularly with just becoming a larger church over the last number of years. We just didn't grow well with this one. There's a number of people would tell you that we need to be able to communicate a single thing in multiple ways, and I think we're still figuring out what that looks like. We have lots of different channels that we communicate with you. The main one being the members memo, which, if you're watching, read your members memo.
Yes.
So if they're watching, they probably did read the members memo.
Exactly. So you guys are the winners. But yeah, just that we're continuing to learn how to communicate. Not just like it's not just difficult because we're a church, but we're a church that has lots of different kinds of people and who all communicate differently. So it makes sense that this is something that's hard because if everybody in our church had a singular way that they communicated, this would be easy. Yeah. But people are in completely different stages of life, completely different cultures. So it's something that we're probably always going to be asking, how can we do this better? So.
And I think just provide, not to theologicalize. I don't even think that's a word. I don't know.
Not. Did you learn that in your PhD program?
It's like, when you get a PhD, you can invent words.
Theologicalize?
Yeah, whatever. Anyway.
That's amazing. I love it.
I need some protein, caffeine or something. So, anyway, the point, you know what I'm trying to say. The point is that with communication, this is, when you think about communication and the fall, just that part of what the fall, it hinders our ability to, and we think about communication, the person speaking or writing or whatever, and the person receiving, and all the junk in between. So you have all those things at play that hinder communication. And so I've never met a married couple that said, that both people say, "Oh, we have communication
figured out."
It is a lifelong process of continuing to get better at. And so that's all I'm saying. That's not any different in the church. So we are constantly trying to get better, but also in 10 years from now, my guess is we'll be able to say, "Hey, we need to get better at communicating." So that's one of those things that, like, you're never going to hit where you fully need to be because of the fallen nature of individuals and how we hear things and communicate, all that. But we want to continue to
we can get better.
Yeah,
and
we're going to get better. Yeah, that's not an excuse not to get better.
Yeah.
This is a lifelong process
Yep.
of always seeking to get better in this. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing and even this kind of members' voice feedback was kind of a way of doing that, but to hear from you guys, not just to be saying things, but to hearing back from you. So super encouraging that you guys embraced that, and so many of you made comments about how it was refreshing to have a way to voice these things. And so I would just say, like, to encourage you guys, we always want to hear that. We may have, created a system and even a culture where it seemed like that wasn't the case. But we don't have to have these formal ways of saying, hey, here's a survey, fill it out. We want to hear from you guys. And that's part of even the thought and the philosophy behind ministry teams, is we want to continually push the leadership down and give you guys a voice and actually ownership of things like that. So this was kind of a start, but we want that to continue. And just so you know, and you hear it from us, we love this feedback and we want to continue to hear it.
Yeah. To be specific, you can send the praises to Joel and I, and the criticisms to Jason.
Amen.
That's the way we've structured it.
That's the way you've structured it. Good stuff. All right. The next thing I have here that something we want to address, and this is kind of a thing that we've been talking a ton about. It's kind of just clarity in general, and I had clarity around ministry teams, but really just vision in general, that we need to have and be able to articulate clearly our vision, not just for ministry teams, but for the church as a whole. And that's something we've been spending a ton of time on talking through. We have a concept of where we're going. Obviously, we know who we are and what we want to be, but we want to be more and more clear and concise and regular in our communication of the vision. And so, what did you guys see as far as like just a desire for that from our members?
Yeah, it's good. In part, that's encouraging because people want to know where we're going.
Yes.
And what type of church we are. So that part is good. I think it's a reminder. Like one of the things I personally struggle with, like that's a constant reminder, like whether it be in my marriage or with friends or with, staff, pastors, is making the assumption that everybody knows what's in my mind. And of course they don't know if you don't say it or articulate it. So I think that's just in a good way, constantly remembering that we cannot say things too much, I think would be one thing. And you can't over communicate just because you say something 1 second here doesn't mean it doesn't need to be said over here. So just being reminded that that's something I know personally I can grow in, and the importance of us having things like one of the things that has stuck with us since the members meeting was the people of the church doing the ministry of the church. Like it's helpful. I think in just having things like that are continually repeated and things that as members we can grab onto. It's like, hey, these are, I don't need a paragraph of who we are. I need a phrase, a half a sentence. And that's helpful for people. It's helpful for me. It's helpful for all of us. Yeah. And just the importance of us continuing to grow in things like that. So,
yeah, I think it makes sense that this is something that we need to address more. I think there are a lot of things that are going into that, including just the way that we were able to roll out some ideas that we'd been thinking about for years, but rolled out in a time that was complex and confusing, and there's a lot of unintentional implied communication about things that we couldn't control that were set in the context of a year like we've had, a couple of years like we've had. So I think it makes sense. We shifted our vision to seeing all things new in Christ. I think that we have some exciting things coming up, just kind of digging into that and what does that actually mean? Like, I think most people could hear that and say, okay, yeah, like Jesus said that in Revelation, that's cool, but what does that actually have to do with me and us as a church? That's coming. That's something that we've been working on.
Make sure you sign up for the groups coming up.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Amazing. Good.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. The next thing, and I really kind of already jumped ahead and addressed this a little bit, so we won't spend a lot of time on this one, but kind of defining terms. And so a lot of the feedback that we got around kind of these terms about discipleship, maturity, spiritual growth, shepherding, member care, all of those kinds of things, we just need to articulate clearly how we as City Church define those things. Because I think in the absence of that, everyone kind of defines it their own way. And so I think that's just something we need, along with this kind of clarity of vision, is just when we talk about certain terms that are kind of, church buzzwords, we need to be able to say exactly what that means for us. And so that's something that we're focused on and concentrating on. So just know that. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that. Okay. The next thing, and this came out in a lot of comments and really in different ways, but diversity. Again, that's another one of those kind of buzzwords that's thrown around our culture a lot. But on the positive side, like we have made some great moves towards being diverse, particularly in our congregation. We're starting to reflect more and more our neighborhood and our city, who we are. We have a long way to go. If you look at churches in general, I would say we are doing well, but the bar is very, very low, sadly, in churches. And so we saw a lot of comments that's just something our people desire. We're in a very diverse area. We desire that. We teach on it. Cory preaches on it regularly. It's something that we desire, and not only in our membership, but also in our leadership. That's been, something that we've been praying for and begging God for. And, I think we're moving positively toward, but something that we want to continue to do. So any comments on that, guys?
Yeah, I think I would just say like a pastoral note in that, because agreeing with everything you're saying and just kind of framing of like this is like to grow in diversity is something that you're always walking against the flow of the river, the stream, because even in the 70s and 80s, there, in sociology and church growth stuff, like this idea of what was called like the homogeneous unit principle, which is the whole foundation for a lot of church growth 40, 50 years ago, that was based upon this sociological reality that people like being around people that are like them.
Yep.
Not an earth-shattering idea. We are drawn to people who look like us and act like us and have the same interests as us. That refers to ethnicity. It refers to age, education status, hobby interests, economic status, all those kind of things. So when we talk about diversity, we are not just talking about black, white. We're
Exactly.
talking about, obviously, that is one component of it, but also it's economic diversity, educational diversity, age diversity, all those kind of things. And, our natural inclination is not to be with people who are not like us. So that's just something that all of us, our church will have to fight on a daily basis to fight against of just wanting a church that's full of people like us. So this is hard. This kind of goes back to the communication. This is not going to be solved in 2 months. This will be something that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that we will have to be fighting against and pushing against until Jesus returns, because it's not our natural disposition. So that's just an encouragement to this will be something that we will constantly have to be talking about and not grow weary of talking about and fighting against. So
yeah, because people change, and people the parameters that we are measuring diversity by are constantly changing their dynamics. So it's a conversation that will never end. It's a beautiful thing. It's not. It doesn't have to be like a problem that we're trying to solve. It's actually something really, really beautiful to try to figure out how do we pursue unity in the midst of diversity.
Yeah. So it's a great thing that we're called to represent.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Yep.
So
bottom line, though, we hear you. We hear your desire for it, but hear us. If we haven't said it enough, that is something that we desire and are striving for. But to Cory's point, it's going to be a battle we all have to be in together. So good stuff. Next one is this was kind of that mixed bag. I think it's hard to say we're being more humble and more transparent humbly. But I think that is something that we have heard from people, that there seems to be a move from the pastors and leaders of the church toward this kind of openness, transparency, humility, whatever you want to call it. It's something that the Lord has brought to us. He has humbled us through a lot of things that have happened over the last couple of years. And so that is something that we talk about, again, a lot, that we desire to do. And it was encouraging to see that is being noticed somewhat, but it's also something that there were comments that we need to do better and keep improving in that. So what would you guys say to that whole topic?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. So I don't have anything to add. Yeah. Yes, I'm thankful for people noticing that there has been an intentionality there, but also we would be the first to admit that we're not where we need to be. Yeah. So it's just a cool continual thing to grow in. Yeah,
not to keep beating the ministry team's drum, but that's where we're going. But that is again, that's one of those things that we're desiring to be an outcome of this, is that as we are openly and humbly saying we can't do this as the leaders of the church, that we want our members. We need our members. We need every person to play their part, to use their gifts, talents, time, all of those things to help us do the ministry we've been called to. And so even just this is part of that, of us humbling ourselves, saying we can't do this. We don't desire to do this alone. We want to do this together with you guys. So good stuff. All right, the last thing I have down here is that we've already addressed this, but we did hear, obviously, a lot of comments about what are the gaps between what community groups did well and what we are hoping and dreaming ministry teams will do. And so we knew right from the beginning there's going to be some. We heard those comments. So guys, what are some of the things that you took away from that? And even if you want to address some of the things that we have plans for and will be addressing, but just to allude to them, as far as again, we didn't want to take one catch-all kind of ministry, which is what we said community groups were. We tried to do everything and put another catch-all construct or program in place. So what are some of the things that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, well, I think, again, I mentioned this before, it makes sense that there's confusion here. Yeah. This is one of the difficulties of being in COVID times, that we rolled out a new concept without the ability to do an old concept. And so we probably would have done it differently if we weren't in COVID times, even though this was something that we were moving towards. I will just say that the thing that I think that it will accomplish is kind of that we used to emphasize saying like participate in Sundays and be in a community group, and that was kind of what it meant to be a member here. We are shifting that to saying participate in Sundays and participate in a ministry team, and that serves as kind of the primary way that we see the engagement of our members within our like main system. This is how we moving forward kind of will keep things in check. As we have different people, different leaders leading over these teams, this is one of the main primary mechanisms that we'll be able to keep tabs on our members. There are so many of them, and we need to have a place. And we're saying if everybody is supposed to be involved in a ministry team, that allows us to gives us the framework to be able to keep tabs on everybody. I think the things that we're clearly seeing they're not being able to do is kind of those gatherings in neighborhoods, and like what that meant. Personally for me, the ability to invite my neighbors into my home was a huge thing, and we had a community group I think every year except for one since we existed as a church. So that's huge for me, is being able to invite my neighbors in. And I think the other piece of it is just that kind of weekly discipline of sharing your heart with other people, and not to say that won't happen in ministry teams at all. Like actually, we hope that would, and that you build friendships and you build trust with each other. And but it's definitely not. We're not getting together in ministry teams and asking how are you this week, and like what do we need to pray for, and what do we those are things that we are hoping to address in other ways. So
cool. And we have plans for that, and some of that will be discussed in the implementing and the training that's coming up in the next 6 weeks. Part of the balance in all this is not trying to be good at communication and not like overwhelm and like here's 500 different things. But one of the things we've been aware of is recognizing that one of the reasons why we wanted to retool and rethink community groups because they did become a catch-all. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to make the same mistake with ministry teams, in that ministry teams becoming this catch-all where they're expected to do everything, because then you have the same problem a year from now. But also the balance is that we recognize that people have lives to live, and that means work and family and responsibilities in social life and with friends, all those kind of things, and just the balance of also not saying here's 500 things to do. So we have some ideas that I think we think we will that can resonate and go well. We just want to make sure we're talking about those in the best way in the right time, and as we get ministry teams implemented and communicated in a way that is helpful for everyone. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah, okay. Well, I'll just end with an exhortation. So,
yes,
thank you guys for taking the time to do this. And Jason, I think you kind of touched on this at the beginning when we were talking about one of the excitement about people being involved in things. But just we can't say this enough, that a lot of these things that we talked about are very exciting. They will only actually become exciting when members are sacrificing their time and their energy to participate in them. Okay, so again, it's easy for us to talk about, this is going to be exciting. It's easy for you to fill out a form and say, this is going to be exciting. Where the work comes is when we are saying, you know what, instead of watching Netflix, I'm going to read this, or I'm going to go invite my neighbor over, or I'm going to spend time praying. I'm going to go volunteer at this event that's happening that's showing love for our city. That's where the transformation begins to take place. So just as your pastors, we want to encourage you that that's not easy. Sometimes it's easy. A lot of times it's hard. But just that even now we are praying that the Spirit is molding our hearts, that is changing our hearts to give us hearts that are going to be willing to say no to certain things, time-wise, money-wise, so that we can say yes to other things that are going to lead to this church being the church that needs to be, to faithfully engage and be a part of what we hope is tremendous transformation throughout our neighborhoods. And so again, encouraged by all these things, but also just an exhortation that we are continually praying and dependent upon the Spirit to see it through. As Jason mentioned earlier, if you guys have any questions, other things, please let us know. If you are someone who is like, man, I just want more information about these questions, I'd love to see everything. We have an Excel document that has it all there. It would take you about 5 hours to read through. If you really want to see that, email us. We'll send you the link to it. And so that way you can see every question, every answer. If your itch has not been scratched enough with what we've talked about here. So anyway, so I'll quit talking. Thank you guys. Love you guys. Hope you have a great week.